Time is 7 o'clock and we'll call to order the City Council meeting for February 25th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones? Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here.
Motion to excuse Councilman Jones.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Tonight's invocation will be led by Reverend Tracy Sumner, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll all please stand.
Let us all bow for a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for thy blessings. We thank you for keeping us and watching over us. We thank you for allowing us this opportunity to come tonight to be able to move ahead with the business of this great city we call Delaware. Oh Lord, touch the leaders. Allow them to be able to continue to grow with you, in you, through you, that the community might be able to work and grow together. We thank you for this time. Now open up our hearts and our minds to hear what needs to be heard, what shared, what needs to be decisions that need to be made, that we might be able to do it in decent and in order. We thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held February 11, 2019, as recorded and transcribed. What is the wish of council?
I move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Keller, a second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Abstain. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this in the record.
Item A, resolution number 19-07, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a recreational trail grant agreement between the Delaware County Board of Commissioners and the City of Delaware Liberty Township Board of Trustees. And item B, established March 25th, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. as a date and time for public hearing and third reading for ordinance number 19-07, an ordinance amending chapter 1121 and 1143 of the Planning and Zoning Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Delaware.
So any motions on the consent agenda?
Move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Browning. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, or public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing none, we'll close that. Move on to committee reports. Mrs. Keller, do you have anything?
I have none.
Mr. Browning?
I have none.
Mr. Rohr?
I have none.
Mr. Hellinger?
Nothing, thank you.
Wow, I've been lazy. I'm just kidding. Item 8 is consideration of a new liquor permit.
Consideration of a new liquor permit for Weetran 820 Sunbury Road, number 6004, Delaware, Ohio 43015, permit class D3.
Madam Mayor, members of council, for consideration is a new liquor permit for Perfect 10 Nails and Spa located at 820 Sunbury Road, Suite 604. This will be a new permit for a new D3. I anticipate there will be other permits coming through with this location. This is becoming more of a typical business model with the nail and spas. So nothing in the applicant or the business background that would substantiate any kind of legislative basis to request a hearing. So staff recommends approval.
Okay, any questions? Any motions?
Recommend approval without objection.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mrs. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Item 9 is the second reading of resolution number 1906. Elaine, if you'll please read this on the record.
Resolution number 19-06, a resolution supporting the approval of the Delaware Knox Marion Morrow Solid Waste Management District Plan Update dated November 14th, 2018.
Yeah, I believe we discussed this at the last meeting. Jenna Hicks was here then. She's here tonight. She's the executive director of the Delaware Knox Marion and Morrow County Solid Waste District. Bill, do you have anything to add regarding this?
Nothing further to add, and I'd recommend approval.
So, and again, this is a 5-year plan, I believe. And we will have an opportunity to provide input for its next update. We'll be involved in the district's activities. And obviously, the biggest issue we have is the recycling, the recycling market, and we really can't control that right now. So we would recommend your approval this evening.
Any questions for Tom? Any motions?
Move for approval of resolution 1906.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. We'll move on down to item 11, which is the second reading of ordinance 1906.
Ordinance number 19-06, an ordinance for Carroll's Corporation approving a final development plan for Burger King on approximately 1.14 acres on property zone B3 PUD, General Business District with a planned unit development overlay district, and located at 1034 West Central Avenue, US 37.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is the second reading for the final development plan for the Burger King plant in the Bueller Center. The applicant is here tonight, and they have some proposed updates for you after hearing from you and the public and some comments last time. So I think I'd just invite them up to explain what they heard and what they'd like to do. What I have on the screen is what was before you last time, and just to refresh your memories, some additional screening up here in the northwest corner, a couple of new deciduous trees, 3-foot up planting screening around the entire parking lot as required by code, and a planned unit development text. And this is what they're proposing to do as well today. So Amanda, I think the floor is yours.
Can you state your name and address?
Yes,
for the
sorry.
record, please?
Amanda Aldridge with Carroll's Corporation, and my address, 917 Harbor View, Memphis, Tennessee.
Thank you.
After hearing last time about the screening from the neighbors and wanting more screening, we have added more trees, which Melissa Miller, our engineer, can speak maybe more to the specifics of the evergreens and all the fun technical terms behind the trees. But we've added a lot more trees. We already had quite a few trees, but we are adding more trees to that corner so that it is as solid naturally with trees screened as possible. It should look really pretty, which it was going to look pretty, but it'll be nice and lush and very green back there. I'm trying to think. Landscape, Melissa can.
Melissa Miller, 395 Rockmill Street, Delaware. So we have proposed additional evergreens along the Crestview corner, that northwest corner up there, as well as fully screen the parking lot. Came back and added the shrubs on the north side as well, so that cars entering there, you won't see reflection going beyond that. The 2 deciduous trees that are located there are to meet some of the tree planting or tree replacement requirements. I think with all the evergreens and the trees that are being added, beyond what's required for planting in the right-of-way, street trees, and parking lot, that we are exceeding the required replacement with the addition of these evergreens.
By my count, Madam Mayor and Council, a quick count, they're about doubling the evergreen tree number on this western tree row, just for summary. There's also an existing tree row, you'll recall, and it's kind of hard to see here, but it's shaded in about this area. Some of it is not on their property. This is not on their property, but they're trying to preserve that as well down there.
Any other questions or comments from council? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the extra trees.
Yeah.
Keep everybody happy.
Yeah, just to like, be kind
It's ready for motion.
Do you want to make a motion on this tonight? And it's the second reading.
I think we should take it to 3.
Is there a reason why?
You typically, we take controversial projects, and I would say there's been a fair amount of controversy with this one. We usually take those to 3.
Did they fix everything that was the controversy? I'm just asking.
I'm not sure how the public feels about that, but
Excuse me?
I don't know how the public feels about what they fixed. We haven't heard from anyone.
You have to come to the desk and give your name and address for the record.
My name is Dan Rand. I live at 131 Crestview Drive, and the second house there is my property. While I greatly appreciate all the efforts they've gone to, one of my biggest concerns besides that was the traffic problem on Central Avenue. And as I stated before, what you can't see in a flat picture or drawing is that that entrance is at the crest of a hill. Now, I don't know what your timeline is as far as, are you going to do road improvements first before they start this project to widen out Central and put that turn lane in? Does anybody?
Well, I think either Bill or Dave can provide some
information
on that.
Yeah, right here, sir. We haven't talked specifically with the developer on the schedule, but typically a road improvement like that would be required to be constructed concurrently with the site. And we could even make it a condition that it has to be completed and operable with the opening of the proposed Burger King. So to answer your question, they should be in place and we can make it that way.
Well, if I would make a suggestion, would you do that after school is out for the summer? Because access to every school is off of Central Avenue. And as I stated at the last meeting, and he affirmed it, there's over 10,000 vehicles a day that use that street. And from 7 o'clock in the morning on, you can hardly get out of my driveway. 90% of the time I end up going right, going up to Lexington Avenue and turning around and coming out on that light. So if they're going to widen that street, at least wait until school's out. That may be a major delay to their project. The other thing I wanted to know was, did anybody ever consider moving this down to the empty lots down at CVS? I mean, they've already got roads widened there. You've got access off 2 major roads, Halleck and Central. Because even though they've gone to great lengths to, dress up the appearance, there's still the matter of the smell. And as I told them the last time, I work next to a Burger King, and it's all day long. So my 2 big concerns are traffic and smell.
Okay, well, I hear you. This is zoned properly, so we'll just.
Yeah, I understand that, but
You can't tell someone not to build it there because they don't like the smell of the hamburgers.
would you want to live next door to it? Yes or no? That's.
I don't have any hamburgers, so it wouldn't bother me. Yeah, it is.
The other thing is the traffic, and I don't know how many of you use or live near Central Avenue on a daily basis, but it's hectic, to say the least.
But what's important to, may I please?
Absolutely.
What's important to understand is the applicant
is not responsible for all that traffic. They're responsible for
Oh, I understand
whatever
that.
that couple hundred cars is. So your inability to get out of your driveway today is not their concern. It's
Well, I
not their
understand that,
issue,
but it
they don't
should-
need to address it. They need to address the traffic portions that they are responsible for, which is the left turn lane, to allow traffic to flow.
It may not be their concern, but I think it should be your concern because it's an accident waiting to happen. And not to mention that at the bottom of that hill is a school bus stop. So you're gonna have people backed up. I don't know how big a turn lane is. What's it hold, 2 or 3 vehicles for a turn lane?
How deep it's planned for.
I don't know the exact length, but it's being sized based on
Yeah.
the traffic model.
So with the traffic that's on that street, you're still gonna, if you get more than 2 or 3 cars wanting to turn left, then they're all gonna be backed up into that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Do they have a timeline for building this?
Dave, do we know what their plan is for construction?
Well, I think I would defer to the applicant since they're here tonight, but 2019.
Sometime this year?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 12, was consideration of resolution 1908.
Resolution number 19-08, a resolution indicating what services the city of Delaware will provide to 100.648 plus or minus acres of land, more or less, description and map are attached hereto for the annexation known as the Gordon LLC annexation by Michael R. Shade, agent for the petitioners.
Mr. Eflin?
And Mayor, members of council, this is the first step in the Ohio Revised Code dictated process for annexations. As council is well aware at this point, the first step is a resolution of services. Per ORC, we only have 20 days, I believe, to turn this resolution back around to the county commissioners. Then they would take their actions as prescribed by the revised code, and then it comes back to the city, has to sit for a while, and then can be placed on your agenda for final annexation review. That typically then allows a 120-day period to consider that. During that period, the applicant is intending to file for at least a rezoning, a preliminary plan, and a preliminary plat so that we can attempt to have the final annexation and the zoning questions dovetail and come together at the end of that process. Obviously, some of this is dictated by revised code scheduling, and some of it's dictated by the applicant and how they can get information into us in addition to when we hold meetings. So we try to get those to dovetail as closely as we can. But that's what's before you tonight. Staff from all departments have had an opportunity to review the resolution of services. Nobody has any objections. We did provide for you and the applicant some potential conditions relative to any kind of final annexation, which would include things such as the properties in the Delaware South New Community Authority area, or the applicant would place it within that. There'd be $1,000 per dwelling unit additional transportation fee, which is consistent with all the other developments in the area. The development is in our Southeast Highland Trunk Sewer District, and therefore would pay an additional capacity fee of $3,200 per dwelling unit. This is in the sort of the farthest part of our utility boundary, being Peach Blow and the railroad tracks here, as council's aware. And then the extension of any kind of needed infrastructure would be at the expense of the applicant at this point. And then there are some, we try to detail out some connectivity requirements that we will have as we go through really the development process and the zoning process, but put out here for your review and the applicant's review anyway, to make sure we have east-west road connections, which is something the applicant's been working on for, I'm going to say, at least a year, maybe 2 at this point, with their adjoining neighbors, Ohio Health, specifically to the west. And then, of course, the continuation of Winterbourne, where you see the beginning of that here on the graphic. that would come eventually down to Peach Blow Road and is an important transportation connection for the community. All told, it's a little over 100 acres of ground, as you see on the screen, and we would recommend approval of the resolution of services as submitted. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions
Yeah.
for Ms. Jefflin?
Dave, just real quickly, refresh my memory and council as to when the annexation, the clock is ticking, I know, for the acceptance, correct? Didn't we did a file?
Well, they file, but the way it works is it'll start ticking really when it comes back to us.
When is that? Because I know there's a timeline.
About 60 days or so.
County approved.
Okay, and then we've got,
From the date that the clerk receives it, it's my understanding, 60 days, that nothing can happen.
okay,
Back from the county.
but what's the date by which you've estimated it has to be accepted by city council?
Okay.
I have to turn this into the county tomorrow.
So I think we can calculate, we haven't pre-calculated that.
Okay,
so
I didn't know if you
But we could
had
do
an
that
estimate.
tomorrow pending the action tonight.
Yeah, the county gets it, and once they send it back to us, then our next trigger starts. So there'll be
Correct.
some room as to how long it takes them to send it back.
Correct.
Any questions?
Is it a type 2 expedited?
Type 2
Correct.
expedite. They have 5 days after the 20th day after we deliver the resolution. They have 5 days to tender objections from Berlin Township. However, there are only 4 things that they can object to, and this annexation meets all those. So there's nothing that they can do to stop this annexation. The only people that can stop it, sitting in front of us this evening.
Tell them, I think ballpark about 4 months from.
Okay. I asked the question. Councilman Keller, in my conversation with her today, just briefly about tonight's agenda, and this item was just the fiscal impact that the annexation has on the city, and that's something that if it's desired, we could provide some type of an estimate of what the impact would be on the city, and that's, I don't know if that's something that you want to consider, but I know you had indicated it to me.
I don't see how we can't factor in what will this end up costing us, because we are basically saying we'll provide services to extra land that's not already within the city of Delaware. So we'll be taking on new roads, we'll be taking on new citizens in this land to provide police and fire service to. And so without some ballpark of what will that cost us versus what is the net benefit, it's difficult for me to analyze whether we want to annex new property. I have a concern that we don't have an adequate funding source for roads as it is. I also, and I don't know if this factors into a resolution of services, but was following this case through the Planning Commission and had some concerns regarding the concept plan that was brought forward. In that concept plan, and just for reference sake, the property to the north of this is zoned R2, which requires 70-foot lots for homes. And 21 of the lots that were proposed in this concept plan were 80 by 130, so that would fit pretty well within that zoning. But there were 123 lots that were only 65 feet wide. And then there were 102, which were 52 feet wide. And so for comparison, again, the R2 zoning is a minimum of 70 feet wide, and that's just to the north. So I don't know if that legally factors into a resolution of services, or if that's something that we talk about later on when we get further into the development plan.
So you kind of touched on a few things. The size of lots issue probably isn't something that needs to be considered with the resolution of services, because that comes later on in the development process. The paying for the roads and things like that you talked about earlier on, that probably would be appropriate for resolution of services discussion, because that's where you're saying these are the services that we will provide you, the annexee, if you decide to come into the city. So if you were to say, yeah, we'll give you water, but we're not going to provide road service or something, that would be weird, but that's something that would give them a decision that they might not want to move forward with the development. So that's the kind of discussion that I think this is geared towards, which is this is what we will provide if you want to come into the city. You can talk about the other stuff, but that's a question that can be handled at a later time, because they don't have to go through with that annexation. We have that time frame between when the county gets it back where we can continue to negotiate on those things. Dave, am I misstated that at all?
No, the only other thing I would add is, with respect to discussion of lot sizes and stuff, we would obviously have a lot more detail to be able to provide for you. Just recall, the Communities of Glen Ross is a large planned development, and so it's made up of a number of sub areas, all of which have their own required lot sizes and that sort of, and there's a mix in there, but we can go over that in more detail. And I do think that's probably more appropriate for the zoning and development planning, but it's not bad to express your opinion now so the applicant can hear it. I mean, one of the constraints we all face here is just the Ohio Revised Code timing that I don't control it, Darren doesn't, applicants don't, you don't. And so kind of is what it is in terms of resolution services. You would still have the opportunity to not accept the final annexation at the end of the day if that was your ultimate decision.
Yeah, I think what this does is provide, it's kind of a dance between the person who might want to annex saying, well, I kind of want to annex, but I want to make sure if I do, I'm going to be able to have services. So we tell them what kind of services we would provide if they annex, and they decide, okay, now we want to go ahead and move to the next step. If you were to say, you can annex, but we're not going to do the services, then they probably would choose not to. They can stop the annexation process at any time they can withdraw it. We've had that happen too.
Peachboro has always been, or has not always, but has been our boundary line. And then we don't want to go any further than that. That's what we've said for years now.
It is within our utility boundaries, the mayor indicates. It was accounted for in our current comprehensive plan. And it's concept, but even the concept that was proposed, the overall number of units at any rate, density, is within the limits of that comprehensive plan as it sits today. Now, exactly how in the sub areas and those sorts of things are certainly up for discussion.
And this will also help get that road down to Peachboro to finish it down there too. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor. Members of Council, Michael Shade, Post Office Box 438, Delaware, Ohio. In addition, some of you may be aware, but many probably aren't, immediately south of this, unrelated to Evans Farms, is a development that will be heard by Berlin Township next, I believe, Tuesday night for a large addition that will stretch from Peachboro all the way to Shanahan. It's a metro development project, and they're going through the processes within the township. In addition to the connectivity and the extension of Winterbourne, many people are not aware, but there is a planned project south of Peachboro Road, and for lack of a better name, North Street Road extension, which will go from where it ties in to Winterbourne all the way down to Lewis Center Road, at which point it will enter an interchange and eventually move south all the way to 750. So it's a major conduit for Delaware County. And as a signatory for the Thoroughfare Master Plan, although as an amendment to that, I don't think it was contemplated at the time pre-Evans Farms, but one of the things when you look at the lot sizes, one of the things that we had to take into consideration is that there is a major utility easement through this property. There's also, the county does not want an intersection coming out under that tension wire. I understand that, not being an electrician, that employees get shocked every time they have to go out and make a repair. They've also immediately south of Peachboro, as soon as you enter, just immediately south of Peachboro, there is land is industrial under township zoning, and it is also, there is a planned some kind of commercial development. We don't know exactly the extent of that development that will be above their residential unit. So it will serve as a buffer, which makes it a little bit more difficult for people that may not want to spend the money to be right across the street from a commercial setting. That's why it was designed the way it was with the lot sizes, because that makes it more sellable. In addition to that, there's just so many moving parts of which we have no control of. The county has said that they don't want any intersection between Winterbourne and the North State Road South closer than 2,200 feet from the railroad track. So there are limits, and there are other factors here that are going to impact the city, and maybe I think will be a benefit to the city. But at the same time, there's significant cost and moving parts to this thing. And like I said, the extension, we reviewed the utilities. The utilities can service the property that are here now. They're coming off of the Belmont subdivision, and they will come through and connect through a road configuration on the Ohio Health property. It wasn't an easy task. It was an extremely difficult task to do that, and therefore to mean viability. We're also going to have some kind of connectivity to the Evans Farm piece that's immediately to the east of this project. When that gets developed, how that gets developed, I don't know, and I don't even know if it's planned on coming into the city since it's in your utility service area. But those are matters, and that whole area, there's a lot of acreage out towards 23 that will be prime for development also. So it's going to be a mix of commercial, residential, unlike the Pulte project immediately to the north. It's strictly residential. This is not only going to be residential, but it's going to be facing commercial. And so we've tried to preserve a tree area to kind of serve as an additional buffer for the community, but we've tried to factor in everything we could factor in. So I'm here to answer any other questions. This is just a procedure. This is, it doesn't bind anybody to anything. It just says that if the Gurdon LLC does not want to come in, they can withdraw the petition. You can also turn it down. But I think this, as Dave pointed out, is in your comp plan. It was expected to be built. This, as the mayor pointed out, gives you the connectivity that you desire between two county roads. And we'll see what the process brings. But we've spent a lot of time with staff, and they've been very generous with their time as we've gone through and thrown numbers of reiterations at them, roads. Bill's staff has been excellent. We've had multiple meetings with the county engineer's office. The roadway will not be in the city. Peach Blow Road will not be in the city. They may require some additional space, additional feet off the front of the property for additional roadway. But the exact nuance of how this is going to all finalize out is being worked on now by the county engineer's office. It may result in another roundabout at this end. So.
Questions, Mr. Shea?
I'm not sure we knew when we did the comprehensive plan, when was the last time it was completed?
3 or 4.
It's a long time ago. And I'm not hearing any other reason besides that and the connectivity. But I don't know that we knew in '03 and '04 that we would be in a position with our roads where we couldn't take care of the ones that we have.
To Lisa's question about cost analysis, staff, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
can come up with, impact fees and tap fees and predicted incomes and all that. I don't think that should keep us from moving ahead with this. We've got plenty of time to decide yes or no. I don't think we can stop development because of the road situation either. I mean,
Part of the cost analysis will come forward once the plan, as a part of your requirement, we have to do a community impact assessment. That is mostly drafted, but we're waiting for the text to make sure that everything is in match before it's submitted to this. And we're looking at an April 6th, I think, filing deadline when this will be submitted, and we hope to address all those issues. But cost analysis is one of those factors.
I don't see how, for us, it's not a factor. I mean, for me personally, to say, I don't want to stop development, Mr. Schaefer, but development will happen here, whether it's in the city or not. The question is, do we want it to happen in the city?
well, I'm just saying we don't have to decide that tonight. We can approve the resolution and let things move forward. We don't have to decide tonight what we're going to do, but if we don't approve the resolution, then we're automatically making a decision.
Well, how long do we have to make that decision?
Several months.
We've estimated the
It's
next
120 days.
About 4 months from.
And how much time's already passed?
Or
It'll start.
it hasn't started yet.
Okay.
And the clock starts when the county sends it back to us.
It's on for county hearing on March 7th, 9:30 in the morning. And I would only indicate to you that if you decide that this is not something that you want to pursue, then I think this council and this local government has to make a decision on releasing this property from your utility service area, because you are then barring the applicant from going to the township or staying in the township and getting services, because they're not allowed to go above Peach Blow Road. Now, that would be an interesting court battle, which I don't think anybody necessarily wants to go through, but that is a reality. So it's we didn't draw these lines. These lines were drawn by your predecessors and councils going way back. So that's a reality, though. If you can't service it, the county's going to have a major trunk that will service some 1,400 acres that will start, I believe, in June. That will come across 23 just above Hyatt's Road. And it will be, I think it's a 24-inch trunk.
Yeah, I think the question is a valid one, and I think we can provide a report that would indicate what those, obviously the applicant's required to provide what the costs are, or what the estimated revenue generating potential is for that property, but I think you're looking at what is it costing us as a city. And I think we'll do our best to provide an approximation of that. This really is the southeast corner of the city's service planning boundary. There's our eastern limit is the railroad track. Our southern limit is Peach Blow Road. This is it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend a city council to go any, at this point, that's our service planning area. And so hypothetically, yes, it could develop in the township, but then you have this peninsula of property that is going to be serviced by different jurisdictions. And that's where you get this problem that we're trying to avoid. Crestview is an example. Crestview Drive is in the township. There's a fire call out on Crestview today that's serviced by the township. And it's one of those issues you deal with when you have these annexations. So I think it's an important question. Lisa will provide you that information, but we put ourselves in a difficult position here because of the annexations that we have been bringing in the southern part of the city. And I think, arguably, that's helped the city in a lot of ways. I mean, I think this is one of the recommendations of our comprehensive plan was to provide housing in another school district at a higher price point. That's one of the recommendations of our comprehensive plan that was done in 2003, and we were able to do that. We were able to accomplish that with this. So, but given the fact that we're constrained resource-wise in terms of roads, I think it's a reasonable question, and we can provide you that information. It's just I don't know. We'll just have to give you the information, and then let you make that decision.
And the petitioner is here this evening, Robert Gurdon. He is the son of the primary shareholder or unit holder of Gurdon LLC, his father, and Bob's a builder in the Columbus area. And he's been working with a number of developers about their interest in doing parts of this project, and that is moving along also. So we're here to answer all questions. We'll do some of the same analysis that we did when we went through the process with the community authority. I don't think that this is not compared to Pulte. This is not even nearly the acreage that they're doing. I've always been a firm believer, sitting on that side of the table, that you're either growing or you're dying, and you just have to be careful about it. And I think that that's part of the arguments that you heard earlier this evening. Unfortunately, people don't always like to put money into roads, but it's something that needs to happen, and we as all taxpayers have to be willing to pay money for that. We can't complain if we're not willing to solve the problem. This has been a compounding problem as Delaware has continued to grow. But every other community faces the same thing. The state, look at what they're doing, 18 cents to deal with road issues around the state. So I think that, I think we all just have to put our minds together, and that's a battle for another day, but it's coming. We know that you have done a marvelous job identifying issues, be it the point, be it the various connector points on Glen Road Parkway, Merrick Parkway, Presidential Parkway. Those are all major areas that require attention. This is something that will also benefit the citizens because it will run parallel. This is going to run parallel on Winterbourne Road all the way down to 750 Powell Road when it's built out. And in between there, you're going to have the Lewis Center Connect, and there's going to be a new interchange. God knows when that will happen, but at Lewis Center Road as it intersects with Africa and Big Walnut. That's already been proposed by the former governor, and it's on the drawing boards. So there's a lot of things happening here, it's just one of those things that we as a community are going to have to continue to wrestle with. That's just reality, and so isn't the county engineer.
So I'm comfortable saying for the resolution of services, can we? Yes, we can. And then we can come back to the question of should we, perhaps after we have more time. Does that sound acceptable? Okay.
With that, Madam Mayor, I'll move for the approval of resolution 1908.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Browning. Any further discussion?
Just one point of clarification, Madam Mayor.
I knew that was one.
Mr. Holman, you feel like this would be enough time before this would come back to
Yes.
us that we could answer that question with, and I understand there's no way to give specifics.
Yeah.
Because we don't have real people there, but just some idea.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Roll call, quick.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. Let's go back up to item 10, which is a 7:30 public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 19-02. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 19-02, an ordinance amending Chapter 529 of the General Offenses Code of the City of Delaware.
Mr. Shulman?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is the changes that we were discussing last meeting to kind of clean up our alcohol code. A lot of this has been in place since 1967, as far as I can tell. The impetus for this change was, as you're aware, we have renovated and are leasing out the space in the old Gazette building to an entity known as Cohatch. And they've indicated they want to have some events with some alcohol for their members. In looking through whether we can make that happen, we realized that we don't have a citywide policy that says you can't have alcohol in a city building, as some other cities do. But we had these kind of old legacy codes that apply to any building in the city, not just a city-owned building. So we were trying to clean up for that particular purpose, but also take that opportunity to clean up our code. One thing I wanted to point out, as we met last week, we had proposed some revisions to 529.13 to strike 2 sections. Got some possible feedback from some members of council that, you know what, we might as well just consider striking that whole section because it's all kind of antiquated anyway. Whereas before we were just kind of trying to go laser focused, but then we looked at it and said, maybe it's worth just striking that whole section. So in your packet, I've given you sort of 2 alternatives for what we could vote on. We're not in a hurry, so we vote on it at the 3rd reading because this is a code change. So if I can get some feedback from council at the next meeting, you'll either have the final version to just strike the 2 sections that we started with, or the final version to strike that entire section 529.13. Finally, I know Chief Pujanowski was going to reach out to the state liquor agency. One thing I would tell you is no matter what they say, whatever we do wouldn't really necessarily be impacted by that, because if the state says, well, we have a code that says you can't do that, that's going to trump us anyway. So there'd be no harm in striking it one way or the other because we'd still have to follow state law. Is that fair, Chief?
Correct.
Be happy to answer any questions. And I think if you wonder why we had this section in there at the beginning, my only hypothesis is sometimes cities have codes like this to prevent fraternities and things like that from having beer parties and things, but we have other codes that our police department does use to.
How'd that work for you?
I like beer. Sorry. We have other codes that the city does use to enforce against underage drinking. We have underage drinking codes and open containers, so we don't necessarily need this to stop underage drinking fraternity parties. So we have, right, Chief? I don't know why I put beer in quotes, but air quotes.
Any other questions for Darren before I open this up to the public? Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody here in the audience that would like to come forward at this time on this matter? All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. And you just want some guidance before the next meeting?
Yeah, if council has thoughts, I know we talked about it very briefly at the last meeting, but if council has thoughts on whether you're amenable to striking all of 529.13, or if you want to focus on 3 and 4, I can have that ready for the next meeting, but I don't want to just be presumptuous and just make it in between readings.
I say strike it all, but I don't know how everybody else
That's my
feels.
recommendation. Basically, what we're telling people is they can't store liquor in their own business for their own use. And I don't see any purpose that the city would have in doing that. We certainly aren't going to enforce it, so I have on the books.
I'll third.
4th. Okay,
I'll make the change. It'll be incorporated in the packet as the ordinance for next time.
okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, the first section of that is just basically saying if you want to have alcohol, you need a permit. If you want to sell
529.13?
it, 529.05 is.
Okay.
Oh, the only thing we're changing with 529.05, and this is the one where it might have some impact on the state code. We're just crossing out the word furnish because furnish is to give alcohol to somebody. And so it's kind of a weird code where I don't even know how we would enforce it. It basically says you can't give out alcohol without a permit, but there are circumstances when, as we talked about, if you're having a party at a realtor's house or something like that, you just hand out alcohol to some friends, that would possibly violate that. So we're just trying to clean that part up. But today, the feedback I got today doesn't change. That will still be there from the earlier draft.
But if you do an after hours as a business, like a chamber after hours, there's a lot of time there's alcohol there and you don't pay for it. So they do furnish it.
That's why we want to strike the word furnish, because technically under the current code,
You have keep or possesses for sale, furnish, or sell. Well, they don't sell it there. They furnish it.
and the furnish is the part I believe we have the problem with. The sale, I think, is going to be covered by a.
There's a lot of nuances to
Yeah.
the liquor code. So part of furnish is provide or transfer ownership. Where it really comes into play is, are they doing it for profit? Are they selling it? Or is it a event where private people are invited in? And that's where some of the language in 529.13 is a little archaic too, because when you read it, it almost sounds like you can't have a building for the purpose of inviting people in and providing them alcohol outside of having a liquor permit. So striking that and relying on the revised code is fine, because that's probably a lot cleaner and one set of language for everyone to go off of.
Furnish is just the tricky word where it doesn't have that sale element. So what we're trying to do is not have that incident like you talked about, Madam Mayor, where the realtor's having a thing saying, hey, we're not charging you, we're just inviting people, but we're giving out, or as she says, furnishing the alcohol, and all of a sudden you violated
Take out the
529.14.
word intoxicating liquor. I mean, that just seems a little old too. Can we just put alcohol, or does it have to say intoxicating liquor if we're going to do this?
I think that's basically based on state code.
Yeah, I think they call it intoxicating liquor in the.
You can't get intoxicated by drinking beer?
There's very specific definitions of beer, wine, intoxicating liquor. They're all different.
Intoxicating liquor, I believe, as Councilman Rohr says, that's your hard liquor, I think. Not beer is different, I think.
Beer is like no less than 3%, no more than 12% containing malt. Blah, blah, blah.
It is weird, though.
So by striking furnish, it would be permissible. It would be permissible. I mean, it's happening now.
Yeah.
If
We don't want to allow people to sell alcohol without a
Right.
permit, but the furnishing thing, I think, just cleans that up, so it would be allowed. And it's not intended to change existing behavior, as Tom mentioned. This is happening now. We're not going around writing tickets for people having a party at their house, giving alcohol.
Okay,
Thank you.
go on down to item 13, which is consideration of resolution 1909. And if you'll please read this into the record.
Resolution number 19-09, a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign and enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Ohio Attorney General for the purpose of the collection of delinquent debt.
Mr. Stelzer?
Thank you. This is Lori Johnson, our income tax administrator. She's going to talk about this agreement and how we might utilize this with our tax collection process briefly.
So in the process of trying to be efficient and effective in collecting our income tax, we are always looking for additional tools that we can utilize to collect our income tax. One tool that's come to our attention here in the last couple of months is the ability to use the Ohio Attorney General for income tax collection purposes. They've been offering this service for about 7 years now. It's offered to other municipalities, all municipalities in the state of Ohio. There's about 234 municipalities who are using them for collections purposes, not just income tax, but other types of collections as well. In the central Ohio area, Marysville and Pickerington are a couple of cities who are currently using them. And I've spoken to them a little bit on and off over the last couple of weeks, looking at what they're using the Attorney General for, how that's going, how effective it is. And I've presented to Dean this possibility as a tool for our tax department in trying to get more of the tax dollars that individuals aren't paying after it's due. We offer payment plans, we work with individuals, but beyond sending them notices, offering a payment plan, we are still at a point where we're trying to collect monies from our taxpayers. So we're looking at a possibility of partnering with the Ohio Attorney General and trying to collect some of what we are still owed. I'm happy to answer some questions. I don't really have a presentation planned. I have some information, some facts. If you'd like to, talk about those, maybe ask some questions. The Ohio Attorney General charges a 10% fee to our taxpayers. So if we were to utilize them, there would be an amount due to us, but they would charge a 10% collection fee as well. Right now, other cities who are using them, they're seeing about a 25 to 28% return rate on debt that is certified to the Ohio Attorney General. Beyond that, I guess I will open it up to questions and see what you think or what you might have to say, or Dean, if you want to add anything to that.
Just one other thing. I mean, we have a collection process in place, and we go through that. Where I think this tool will be most beneficial is a lot of times we struggle keeping track of people that are here and gone. And we do have a tool where we could actually prosecute people through a municipal court, but we need to have a lot of solid information to do that. And so this gives us a different avenue to go after accounts that, just tough for us to run down. I don't know if Lori mentioned it, but one of the advantages of the Attorney General is they can actually use state income tax refunds as an offset. So somebody owes us $330 and they're due a $200 refund from their state return, they'll pull that and apply that to the.
They also have the ability to take lottery winnings and gambling winnings as well.
So.
How much do you think we have that's outstanding, in your opinion?
I had Lori kind of, it's a moving number.
Right.
And I don't know if you want to just comment on that. I can if you want.
Sure. It's 1.7 million. That's the total outstanding at this point. However, of that, only about 9 million of it is a dollar amount that we would.
900,000.
I'm sorry. What did I say?
Good increase.
Sorry. Yeah. 900,000 is an amount we would consider potentially certifying to the Ohio Attorney General. We are still working with taxpayers, but as we see debt becoming older, this is an option that, if we can't take it to court, there is statute of limitations in terms of taking a taxpayer to court. If we can't do that, we still have the ability to take the debt to the Ohio Attorney General and attempt to collect.
That number represents liabilities going back to 2006. To give you a little idea of basically a tax year, I looked at tax year 2013. We still have, we show a liability for tax year 2013 of $93,673, which $62,000 is penalty and interest. The tax liability is $30,959. Based on the collections that year, that represents the tax portion of it, 0.0015% of our total collections. Even if you combine the penalty and interest that's accrued on that, it's still less than 0.5% of what our total tax collections are. So probably not bad considering that the transiency of some of the people. They'll be in here for 18 months in an apartment and then move on. But again, this just provides another means to try to do everything to collect the taxes that are due.
What point in time or what point in the process will we turn things over to the Attorney General's office?
So we have a 3-letter process. We allow 15 business days for response, and then we try to turn that next letter around within 10 to 15 business days. Once we've gone through that process, ideally, we would want to turn that dollar amount over as soon as possible. For 2017, just tax returns filed in the 2018 tax year, 2017 taxes due, we have about $200,000 in tax debt that's due to us that has gone through the 3-letter process that we would like to move on quickly so that we don't lose those taxpayers who are moving out of the city, who forget, look at communication coming from us later in the year and don't pay attention to it as much as they might in April when taxes are due. So we ideally would want to move on that as quickly as possible, but we do want to allow that 3-letter process so that they have an opportunity to deal directly with us. The final letter does encourage them to contact us for a payment plan
so we could work with them directly. I still think it's best if they can work with us. I think we're right here in their city. They can contact us 5 days a week. We're very good at responding. My personal policy is to always try to return phone calls and emails same day. So if somebody really wants to work with us and they want to take care of their tax debt, we try to do that. For these taxpayers who we've sent numerous letters to who aren't responsive, who maybe aren't getting it because they have moved, this is just, I think, going to be an option and an opportunity to contact them because the Ohio Attorney General does have some resources that we don't have.
The other big advantage is, right or wrong, we could send them a series of 15 letters, and you're talking about a certain element there. It's not going to respond to any of them. A letter coming from the City of Delaware Tax Office versus a letter coming from the Ohio State Attorney General tends to get quicker attention. And I think it adds that element of, okay, before this gets to be a situation. Again, we don't like to prosecute people through our court system, but there's limits on how many cases we can even file over there without inundating that the court over there. So these things tend to get backed up, just getting in line to pursue it to a certain extent. So this hopefully avoids that process because we don't, nobody wants to go down that route if we can avoid it. So the other option, and again, we've considered it at various times over the years, is to perhaps utilize a collection agency, but they're going to charge a minimum 30% of what they collect. I'm not sure they're as ultimately would be as effective. We want to give it a shot and see how that works. And again, it could be a very effective tool for us.
Any other questions?
Is the 10% less what they owe us, or is it tacked on top of it?
We would have the option, but I think the way most of them do it is, they collect the full amount that is due us, and then they charge an additional 10%. Typically, what we do use collection agencies for utility bills and some other things like that. We just eat that cost.
So we'd recommend your favorable consideration of this.
Move for approval of Resolution 19-09.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 14 is consideration of ordinance number 1907. Elaine, if you'll please read this on the record.
Ordinance number 19-07, an ordinance amending Chapter 1121 and 1143 of the Planning and Zoning Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Delaware.
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is the ordinance regulating massage establishments that we discussed last week. This is a first reading. Because this is kind of a big issue, and while we think we've narrowed down the unanticipated consequences, we want to make sure we take a little bit more robust approach to our public hearings. It's my understanding that this will be the first reading. It'll be on for a second reading next meeting, but we won't do our normal public hearing then because we want to set that public hearing out long enough time to invite people and make sure people know about it. Is that correct, Elaine?
March 25th, you just said.
Yes, so that it's going to be longer than normal. So I didn't want you to be surprised when you see the second reading not having a hearing on it next week. But we thought it would be weird to pull it off the agenda and then put it back on. So we'll kind of do the same thing where it'll be a quick reading and then we'll have that hearing because we're hoping to reach out to experts and people who are affected possibly by it to come and speak, business owners and things. So I'd be happy to go over the legislation again. We went over it in kind of in detail last time, but I did want to brief you on the approach in case my baby comes and I'm not here, which is probably going to happen. I'd be happy to answer any questions you or anyone else has.
Any questions? Okay, we'll read it again next time. We'll wait for the motion after that, or the public hearing rather. Okay, we'll move on to item 15, which is discussion of the special events policy.
Thanks, Mayor Riggle and members of council. In my memo that was included in your packet for this evening's meeting, this is something that we've discussed over a number of years, and in particularly, we spoke about it during the budget season for 2019. The Special Events Committee, which is made up of staff and Main Street and the YMCA. We get together once a month and we go over all the special events applications that have been submitted. And we are looking for direction from this body as to how you want us to go forward with special events. It's our, for the number of years that we've sat on we've had the Special Events Committee, we're consistently getting more and more people wanting to do a special event in Delaware. First of all, it's a great place to do a special event. It's a great city. It's very welcoming. But as you know, with every special event, there are costs that are borne mostly by the city. And we just would like to have council to take a moment and if not decide this evening, maybe in the very near future, decide of a policy. I've made 2 recommendations as to event cost policy. They're outlined in your memo. Essentially, the host entity must be a 501c3 or must be representing a 501c3, which means, for instance, an organization like Greenswell, which is a running organization, their profits, or excuse me, they're going to be benefiting or making a donation to the YMCA, who is a 501c3. So that somebody who's a moneymaker, who is making money off of admissions or mostly admissions and signups, that their money, they have to send so much back to a 501c3. An exception to this would be, the first recommendation is that the host entity would pay 50% or $5,000 per event, whichever is less, to this cost of the city, including but not limited to police, fire, and public works. Last year, we paid nearly $162,000. And when I say we, I mean the citizens of Delaware paid $162,000 to have special events in Delaware. Not saying that's a bad thing. I'm sure it did wonderful things for our citizens and for our community, but I think it's important for people to know that how much money is being paid into these special events. Getting back to my first option was, my recommendation is that Main Street events would be exempt, as Main Street is a partner with the City of Delaware and is partially funded by the City of Delaware. Chief of Police Pijanowski reminded me of this afternoon that we probably want to say, in one of his recommendations would be, and I think it's a wise recommendation, is that Main Street First Fridays and their holiday events would be exempt. If Main Street would expand, then maybe this council should consider saying, well, then Main Street would fall under the policy of everyone else. We currently, the City of Delaware bears all the costs for parades, and we would recommend, as a committee, we would recommend that we continue to do that, as long as it's a standalone parade. If you have a parade and then have a, I don't know, you decide to have a food truck event at the end of your parade, where that doesn't fall under a parade. That is essentially, it's one event, but then there would be a cost for that second part. And then finally, but just because of how the Ironman agreement is written with the City of Delaware, I have an exemption here for Ironman. Certainly, council can do whatever they would like as far as giving us direction on a policy, but we're at a point where we're just so many entities are coming to us asking to have a special event. And yes, it's because Delaware's great, but I think it's also they're finding that it's inexpensive to have an event here because we don't charge generally to have a special event here. The second part of this is when we enacted the DORA, staff, mostly me, recommended that that we ask every host entity, even if they're not closing the street with a DORA, that they would carry liability insurance. We've had a year, I have become, and the rest of the staff has become a little bit more comfortable with DORA events. And so it would be our recommendation that going forward in 2019, as long as streets do not have to be closed for DORAs, that there's no need for an individual host entity to pull additional insurance, because the liability for this, for anything that would happen, does fall squarely on the person who's involved with an issue, as well as the providers of the alcohol liquor permit holders. So it's the first one is the DORA policy. The second one is just talking a little bit about the special event costs for the community. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that you've seen this before, but I brought extra copies of the expenses for our special events broken down by event and what we paid in 2018. So I'm happy to share that with you as well again. Any questions?
Does Ironman pay us anything towards police? I thought they did.
There is, we're responsible for paying anything above and beyond, I forget the number, maybe Tom remembers or Bruce, anything above and beyond a certain number we can get back. So we send them a report after Ironman and say, these are all the expenses we incurred. And then once we hit a certain threshold, they pay us back. I can't remember what that number is. Is it 50?
It's either 25 or 50.
That's what I couldn't remember either, but
That's
Chief is shaking his, okay, Chief.
That's considered our in-kind contribution to make
Right.
it. to make
Chief
it
is
happen.
shaking his head at 50,000.
Instead of us paying to bring Ironman in, I think it was
Right.
in-kind services at that number.
Okay. And did we go over 50 with that one?
Yes, we've gone over 50 on every year.
Okay. On the Main Street ones, we've also got the farmer's market, and I don't know how much that involves with, I know we don't shut any streets, but just.
We don't have it, we don't, Chief, go ahead.
The farmer's market is becoming a very popular event, much like Main Street or First Friday was several years ago. We made the decision to shut down the streets. But I've talked a little bit with Susie at the end of last year on how we can manage that where we don't have to shut the streets. So we're trying to keep it to where it's still a open event. Streets are open, but we can maybe mitigate some of the pedestrian congestion downtown.
I would just include the farmer's market on there just in case they grow too much more.
Okay.
With the First Fridays.
Just a question for clarification.
Mhm.
So basically what we're saying is there's two groups of people that would have downtown events. One is not-for-profit 501c3.
Mhm.
The others are ones who are not 501c3s. But is it our requirement that every organization has an event has to donate some money?
Yes.
Okay. So they either fall under one of these two categories?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Have you ever spoken to some of our nonprofits, Arts Group, or who have you spoken to, and what's their feedback?
We hear quite a bit from them, and we've heard quite a bit in the last year since they've known that we were going to be going to council, and they would prefer not paying anything. You asked what they said, so that's what they said. However, they do appreciate the fine services we do provide, and in almost to the entity, we hear about rave reviews about everybody on the boots on the ground that are out there helping police, fire, public works, and the people behind them, making sure that everything's set up the way they need to be set up. So we do provide, in my opinion, and I guess I can give my opinion, is that we provide an excellent service to these people in order to make their events as successful as possible, because this is what makes Delaware great. We don't have a Grand Canyon. We don't have, the oldest tree in the world here. So what makes Delaware great is our special events.
Did this policy come from other cities, or what did you see across the landscape?
Depending on who you talk to, there's a lot of different ways people approached it. Some of our neighbors, municipalities, they charge 100% of whatever it costs. They charge.
I think that would be kind of a shell shock to our hosts, our entities. I'm not sure I would recommend that. And other communities, they do very similar to what we do, is that, first of all, you don't close a street for anybody that's not a 501c3 or 501c3 recipient. So that being said, how much they charge them, a lot of people are in flux like we are. I've had people reach out to me and ask me, has your council made a decision on what your policy is? Because guess what? They want to share our policy with their council. So, however, I mean, compared to some of our neighbors in the Central Ohio area, with the exclusion of some comparable sizes, we do seem to have a lot. We're on the high end of how many special events we have, especially in our downtown area.
You're requesting that if we adopt this policy, that it not affect this special event season, is that what you're asking?
That's something that I would want your consideration. It was something that was brought up by a member of the Special Events Committee, so that our people who are in their planning stages have an opportunity to make sure they understand how much they're going to have to pay.
Jackie, based on, you said you had last year's data.
Mm-hmm.
Based on your costing models that you have here, and using last year's data, how much offset expense would we have gotten based, using 1 and 2 and what we did last year?
Sure. We would have collected less than 25% of the 162. I mean, it's not a big number that would come back if we went with the 50% or $5,000, whichever was less.
But based on the actuals for 2018,
mm-hmm.
we would have recouped about 40 grand.
Probably, yeah.
Whereas we actually recouped $3,500 just
mm-hmm.
last year.
Right.
So. And what would happen if, going back to the Dora,
mm-hmm.
what happens if we do have street closures? Then are you requiring them to have the insurance?
Well, we always require anybody who's closing a street to have insurance, right? And then they're going to also have to pay for those street closures as well. But for instance, let me give you one of the examples that we had about the Dora was the Rotary Club wanted to have their mobile evening dining where they went to different eating establishments. They wanted to be able to give people the option to carry a drink with them from establishment to establishment. Our old policy said they had to have insurance, and it just became too cost prohibitive for them to do it. The only thing that we would have to do is just set up the Dora signs to show the boundaries. And so there would be a small cost to the Rotary to have us do it, because for every door you have to have those signs up. However, they wouldn't have to pay for that insurance, because the liability really does go back to the liquor permit holders, and certainly the person that's nefarious character, so to speak.
Is this something that we could consider accepting applications for the Community Promotions Fund?
You could. Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking if a special event, maybe the Arts Festival or something, would
mm-hmm.
submit a grant and apply for funding to have whatever their cost would be.
And that's another reason I thought it was a good idea to get the policy in place, so that people, before they submit applications for the Community Promotions Fund, it's a perfect idea, because then they can look and see, well, I will need to have, $600 to pay for my event. And so I would like to apply for the Community Promotions Fund.
Except doesn't that say that it's for a one-time event, and if they're going to come back every year, we're going to have to adjust that?
Yeah, and that's something that we've discussed over a number of years about the Community Promotions Fund, is about changing that language, because we have people coming back every year.
Jackie, you got a lot of work to do before you quit. Before you retire, I'm sorry. Just saying.
I'll try to get it to them. But it would really be helpful if we could give some direction to the Special Events Committee And so that we can put a bow on this too. So, but I don't want to push council. It's
No,
up to you, but
We've got some time to think about it. Can we put it on next time's agenda and
Mhm.
make a decision?
Could we also
Absolutely.
get some of that data
Yeah.
about the individual events?
She's
and-
got it.
I have it, yeah. You can pass it around. You've seen before, but I think it was with some budget stuff, so it probably got lost in all the paperwork, so. But I brought copies for everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is everything we spent in
In
2018.
2018. And I want to credit Kim Gepper with that. I didn't do all this work. Kim did all this work, so I appreciate it. And in the meantime, between now and the next meeting, we can ask Elaine to make sure it gets on next meeting, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Just give me an email or a phone call. I'm happy to help out.
All right. Thank you, Jackie, very much.
Thank you.
Staff update.
Because it was.
This is the first, right?
Well, actually, it's a second.
But this is typically, it's
Just a
typically
cut.
what we pay.
But I think we should make it 49.
Do it together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, presentations.
Okay. Sure.
So for the next of them, the director will go to the front of the
Absolutely.
agenda, like a presentation. Sorry, Jessica. You wanted it that way.
Right,
Children,
right.
Oh, wait a minute.
We do. Okay, Jessica's here to give us an update on Human Resource Manager. We're going to have one director each month, I think sometimes two, come in and tell us what's going on in each of their departments.
Very good. With that, Madam Mayor and members of council, here to provide the update, as you had just said, of activities that are going on within the Human Resources Department so far for 2019. As you are well aware, per the budget, Human Resources under the Administrative Services Department is responsible for all aspects of human resources, including but not limited to recruitment, compensation, development, compliance, health and safety services for our city staff. And we're staffed by myself as manager. We also have a human resource coordinator that is a part-time position. That's Lori Diaz. Some of you have worked with her, as well as our administrative services specialist, Whitney Faust, who is new within the last 18 months. The following updates reflect current activities as well as items on our short-term horizon. First and foremost is our finalized leadership behaviors. As you may recall, through other updates that have been provided back in 2017, the city embarked on our succession planning / leadership development efforts with an intended goal of identifying our future leaders and developing them for future roles with the city. And that first phase took place in 2017, and it involved assessing our current leadership to identify those behaviors that make our leaders successful. And the results of that assessment ultimately identified a subset of behaviors that were critical at all levels of leadership, but then also those at the supervisory level, then the manager level, then the director level. And the second phase then of this process took place in 2018, and that's when we brought in Pradco, who we've partnered with for this assessment, to conduct some focus groups for us. Because we recognize that, through these assessments, we've been able to identify what these leadership behaviors are on paper, but how does that compare to our current activities and our future growth? And so to kind of taking some of those things into consideration. So those focus groups were conducted to further develop our leadership behaviors, and those that participated in that event had the opportunity to provide feedback, ask questions, and assist in identifying those additional leadership behaviors that weren't initially captured through that first assessment. So this year, we're happy to let you guys know that this phase 3 of this initiative includes finalizing those leadership behaviors, as well as incorporating our first manager development program that's based around these leadership behaviors. And the city's leadership behaviors, as they've been defined now, are strategic, problem solving, customer service, integrity, teamwork, empowerment, flexibility, cooperation, action-oriented, and time management. Again, the behaviors are reflective of our current state, but also take into account the behaviors that are going to be necessary for future. And these are going to be incorporated into not only our recruitment efforts, but our training and development, evaluation, and promotional efforts as we continue to move forward. And the leadership behaviors, what we've been trying to do is help our leaders identify kind of where that fits within the city's pillars per our strategic plan and our mission, vision, values. So we've kind of laid it out as that how leadership behaviors are linked directly to all that. So as you're aware of what our pillars currently are, our great community, healthy economy, effective government, and safe city, and those are in support of our mission of providing quality, cost-effective public services for a better Delaware, for our vision of providing a vital, safe, and diverse community that promotes high quality of life, great neighborhoods, balanced economic growth, and quality public services. And our values of being transparent, open, and honest, dedication to service, fiscal responsibility and resiliency, personal honesty and integrity, excellence, and teamwork. As I briefly mentioned in talking about just that update right there with the leadership behaviors, we have embarked on our first manager development program, which we refer to as our MDP. And it's being conducted in partnership with Pradco, who again assisted us through the assessment process and the focus groups. And we've also partnered with Pradco on various other planning and leadership developments to date, and for benchmarking and assessments for our safety forces. So they're a known commodity for us, and we trust and value their participation in this with us. The MDP, as we refer to it, combines a series of assessments and workshops and personalized individualized coaching sessions over a 5-month period, with the goal to build our current and future leaders to ensure they're equipped with the skills to contribute not only now, but in the short term, but then also in the future as leadership roles with the city, future leadership roles with the city become available. And as we've communicated to others, this MDP will serve as the standard by which we're going to develop our leaders. The 4 workshops that are currently make up our program are that of managing self, managing results, managing people, and leading change. And for the first year of the program, participation was geared towards those individuals who, where it's been determined that they will, or I'm sorry, where current leadership is going to be or could be retiring within the next 5 years, or for individuals who were either hired or promoted into their current leadership roles within the past 3 years. So again, we have 15 participants for this year. Directors were asked to nominate staff based on that criteria. The pilot group, which includes myself, was then notified, and the program is currently underway. The city's leadership behaviors, again, are being incorporated into the various MDP workshops. City manager has been integral in beginning to incorporate the leadership behaviors to become part of our regular vocabulary in our speak, and is synonymous with our leadership culture. And he shared with our employees, not only at the breakfast, about our leadership behaviors and how they're built around those pillars and our mission and our vision and our values, and really tried to lay the groundwork with that. Additionally, Tom was asked to present here recently to the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission on their Building Positive Workplace Cultures in Government, where he was asked to share information concerning Delaware's recognition and development efforts. And that presentation was very well received. And then most recently here, just last week at our first session of our manager development program, Tom also came and spoke to the class and reiterated the importance of those leadership behaviors in our day-to-day activities. So it was nice to have him championing that for us. So the MDP will be carried forward in subsequent years. It's our intent rather, for ongoing development of our future leaders, and participation in the program moving forward will be through nomination by a supervisor, or will allow individuals to self-identify as having interest, but we intend to have some type of a formal application process to be considered in the program. Next update is on our supervisor training. Since 2006, our HR staff have coordinated monthly supervisor training on a variety of topics aimed at providing education and resources to our frontline supervisors, our managers, and our department heads. Our topics are a wide array and range from harassment prevention, anti-discriminatory practices and laws, drug-free workplace, reasonable suspicion training, to leadership, ethics in the workplace, public records, generational differences, and navigating the discipline process and corrective action. So we cover a wide variety of topics. Currently, we utilize not only our staff, but as well as our city attorney, Darren, and our training and development hours available to us through our partnership with our employee assistance program, which is Impact. They provide some training hours for us. So we're able to utilize their training services on 4 different times per year for them to come in. This year, as a new, kind of changed up a little bit, we're looking at partnering with a guest speaker to come in and talk to us about conducting effective performance evaluations. Our staffing update, positions that we've recruited for since the beginning of the year. We've had 2 permanent part-time parks laborers that we have recruited and filled. Those were filled, the last one today. They started today. And then we also had our part-time paralegal position, which, as you recall, is a new position for this year. And at this point, our interviews are completed and the background check is in process on that one. Another new position for this year was our permanent part-time records technician under the police department. Again, new position for 2019. Interviews are taking place this week for that position. And we're also recruiting for a mechanic technician to backfill 1 vacancy. We recently just had one of our senior technicians resign, accepting a job in a neighboring community. That posting expired just yesterday, and it looks like we received 34 applications for that one. We're also recruiting for a community control officer within municipal court, as we're backfilling 1 vacancy there. And for police officer, we have 2 vacancies, 1 new position for budget, and then 1 backfill over there. We plan on pulling our list of candidates, looks like March 6th, and then we should have our list to the Civil Service Commission by May 1st in an attempt to move forward with hiring those individuals. And then seasonal, we just got out the posting here recently for our Hidden Valley Golf Course seasonal positions, not only the golf course manager, but the cashiers, laborers, et cetera. And that'll be out there until the beginning of March. Hopefully we'll get those staffed pretty quickly. We have got some upcoming recruitments on the horizon as well. We've got our other seasonal positions within parks and public works and utilities, and we'll have those out for the public by March 1st. And we're also recruiting for our new budget management analyst, which is a new position for 2019. We're currently working on finalizing the job description, and that will be posted this week. And for assistant city manager, unfortunately, but fortunately for Jackie, due to her notice of retirement effective July 9th, and we're currently in the stage of finalizing that lengthy, detailed job description, and we hope to have that out by the week of March 11th. And next up would be our part-time communication specialist, again, a new position under the 2019 budget, and we're currently working on job description, and that'll be posted in March. And we, due to another retirement over in our public works department, our customer service liaison, Linda Matthews, as you know, she's tendered her retirement notice, and that's effective June 25th. So we're working on our recruiting plan to get that position staffed to allow potentially a little bit of overlap for that new individual. And then the next one, the last one on our horizon right now is for that of our application system specialist. This is a new position. I believe it's titled differently currently in the management pay plan, but system, what was it, Susie? Systems? Data administrator in the budget. But we're looking at potentially doing a title change in advance of going out for that recruitment, and we hope to have that position filled by August. Let's see, next would be our NeoGov onboarding, again, for the 2019 budget. Our department received approval for acquiring the onboarding module of the NeoGov suite of services. We currently utilize NeoGov for our application tracking system. And so now we're going to acquire that, another arm of that suite. It's the next step for us in presenting a professional and seamless flow for hiring new employees and onboarding them, orienting them to our city, their benefits, et cetera. It allows them to navigate that process completely online, going through their paperwork, reviewing documents, their labor contracts, the employee handbook, making sure that they're signing off on those things, enrolling in benefits potentially, and learning more about the perks included in their employment with the city. And so they can start that onboarding before they even walk through the door, which is great. So we're getting that information in front of them immediately. And then also, the system can be used continuously, even beyond that initial onboarding, to continue with orientation efforts, training videos, if there's things that we want to include out there for that purpose, checklists and forms. We really have a wealth of capabilities there that we're hoping to utilize to our benefit. In addition, the module can also be used as a one-stop shop for current employees to get information or forms pertaining to their benefits, pay plans, current events going on in the city, and general employment. And that kind of fills a gap that currently exists because we don't have a true intranet. And at this time, our contract is fully executed, and we hope to begin implementation by the end of March. So that's good news.
That's a lot.
It is, and I'm not done yet. Hold on. I'm trying to get through it, I promise.
No, you're fine.
Right? All right, next up is we're just real brief, the enterprise resource and planning process. HR staff are currently engaged in that planning process and have worked with staff as well as our consulting firm and co-project manager, Plant Moran, in participating in the needs assessment, as well as the draft RFP from the HR perspective, as we currently do not have a formal HRIS. So just real brief on that. Contract negotiations, all labor contracts are coming up this year for renewal, and the first groups are, with the exception of fire, the first groups are going to be the FOP patrol and supervisors, which expire in late June. Pre-negotiation planning is currently underway for those two groups, and our city attorney, Darren, will serve as the city's lead for negotiations with department and HR staff as subject matter experts and support. Our employee handbook, HR staff are working to update the employee handbook with a goal to have draft revisions out for review by the end of the first quarter. And the last complete revision was done in 2012, so that's a little overdue. So looking to get some updates in there. And let's see, I think lastly is wellness. As you're aware, the decision was made to not renew our agreement with Baveri, who was our wellness provider, online wellness provider for the past 3 years. Rather, the decision was made to bring the program, its design, administration, and reporting in-house. And Lori Diaz, our HR coordinator, and Whitney Faust, our administrative services specialist, are the ones who are coordinating that, and they've built a really, for the two of them doing this, I feel that they've built a really robust program for 2019 that incorporates disease conditions data specific to our population. So we're taking this information directly from the data from CoreSource. This year's program has a specific focus on partnering with community providers to meet our wellness needs and ensuring our employees and their spouses have an established primary care physician relationship. Our wellness partners for 2019 include not only Ohio Health, but the YMCA, Delaware General Health District, and our Employee Assistance Program Impact. Our objective is to target and reward activities that have the potential to positively impact the city's health insurance claims cost and prescription utilization. To that end, we are participating with Ohio Health for preventative care services where employees and their families will have access via a direct phone line to schedule an appointment and be seen within 48 hours over at Smith Clinic. We're going to have 2 physicians and 1 physician assistant that are specifically assigned to us. So employees will call this number, be able to get connected immediately rather than waiting. I mean, I know they've been adding doctors over at Smith Clinic, but still sometimes for an appointment for initial visit, you can be a week out potentially. So this will ensure that folks that want to be seen have the ability to get seen in that shorter window. And ultimately, our goal with that partnership is to increase the number of employees and their spouses who have that primary care physician relationship, which studies have shown we can expect to see a reduction in those emergency room visits, those urgent care visits, and by engaging in preventative care to avoid the onset of particular diseases. Additionally, our program incorporates activities and classes to address some of the most costly health insurance claim diagnoses that we've seen historically. So going back to our 2017 reporting data, hypertension, diabetes, asthma, COPD, coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure, major depression, and back pain. We're partnering with the YMCA to facilitate their diabetes prevention program. And we're also exploring their blood pressure monitoring program, as well as additional programming centered around fitness, nutrition, and stress management. So participation in the program will earn points, as it has done before, which employees and their spouses can use to spend in our wellness store based on their certain level of achievement. And we also, actually, another thing that we've done this year is that we've increased the incentives for participation, as studies have shown the corollary relationship between the higher incentive values and participation. Our programming for the year has already begun, and our formal kickoff will take place Tuesday, March 5th. I believe you all received an invite for that at our wellness fair and biometric screening, and that's going to be held over at the National Guard from 8 a.m. to noon on Tuesday, March the 5th. And then moving forward, our wellness goals include replacing our current participation incentives with a reduction in health insurance premium contributions. That's updates so far from HR. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Come on, George. Question?
No?
Okay.
Lots of good information.
Yeah.
The onboarding process, will someone do that mostly at home then, or will that
Yep.
be here? Okay.
That can be done at home. They can do it if they don't have a computer at home. They can certainly do it at the library, and we also have our PC that we have set up outside of our office for them to come in and complete that process.
And the management training, how often do they meet? Quarterly, monthly?
So it's a 5-month program. There's those 4 sessions. So effectively, we're meeting once every 4 months, once a month for 4 months. And then there's a little bit of homework and the individual coaching sessions, et cetera, that's kind of built into that. So it's the program, again, kicked off on February 20th, and we'll conclude right at the end of May for this first group.
And what time of the day do they meet?
We did 8:30 to 12:30. So it's 4 hours for each of the workshops.
And so does that take a lot of people out of like a small department?
It does. So in fact, if
That
you recall,
worries me.
well, it depends. It takes them away, but we don't, our group for this first year is spread across all of our departments. So we're not taking, I think there's one department that has 2 individuals from the same department, but they're a large enough department that they're able to absorb that for that time, and in support of that effort, quite honestly.
I just get tired of getting phone calls because they call this department and nobody answers their phone. And I try to stress they're all busy, but I never know what they're busy at. So, okay, thank you.
Yes, we had the snow event on Wednesday, which was our kickoff, and so we were, early in the morning wondering if we were going to even be able to still hold it. So thankfully, we had everybody in attendance. A couple had to come a little bit late, and then we only had one individual who had to miss altogether. And so there'll be a makeup session for that individual to participate.
So thank you very much. That was very informative.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jess.
So you were like our guinea pig, but I'm glad it was you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Excellent job, thank you.
May I get one for Chris?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go into the finance director's report.
Included in your packet was a report that encompassed the 2008 calendar year. If I can, I would kind of like to walk through it a little bit and touch on a couple issues. I think there were some important issues that came about in 2018. If you have access to the report, begin on page 1. This is what you see typically each month in my finance report. It's a summary of our general fund, our direct general fund accounts, revenues and expenditures. And as I mentioned, at budget time, I was anticipating that 2018 was a pretty good year budget-wise. Several of our, especially discretionary general fund revenues were up above what was anticipated, led by income tax collection increases of 7.43% from the prior year. Interest income was up quite a bit, 105%. License and permits was another big jump. Property tax collections were up about 157,000. I note those discretionary revenues because we've got flexibility in utilization. 2017, a big jump in revenue was engineering fees, which is a reimbursement for a cost we incur. So, that was, like I said, pretty good on the revenue side in 2018. Expenditures, most of our departmental operations were well within their budget amounts. Were a couple supplementals, but most of those were driven by changes in capital issues, not so much operationally. We did do, and one of the reasons the actual 2018 expenditures are above the 2018 budget amount was we did do an advance to the CIP for the Cohatch facility, and that'll be paid back. So that's shown below as an increase basically in our fund balance, because it'll go back into the fund. But at the end of the year, year-end fund balance, this is an unencumbered amount, so there's open purchase orders have been subtracted. It's $5.9 million, which is above what we anticipated going into 2018. If you recall at budget time, I talked about a couple reserves, or at least one. One was the purchase order amount, which is about $503,000. The other was related to engineering fees, and we did make some changes. The council's aware of that, in how we bill developers for engineering fees moving forward. It'll be as we incur the expense, we will be billing and invoicing them for that. And I think we've pretty much made that transition. We've got a couple developments that we're going to more than likely refund and rebuild just because they started, just before we made the transition. But at the end of the year, we did have, I checked with Rob, city's accountant today, about $456,000 of what I'll call prepaid engineering fees. We'll actually show that on our financial statements as a liability. Those are fees paid by developers for costs that we're going to incur in the future. And again, that was one of those things I'd mentioned at budget time. I kind of showed that as a negative to our fund balance, knowing that we're going to incur those costs in the future more than likely. And I wanted to make sure we accounted for that. But that's at least the general fund stuff that you see on an ongoing basis. Page 2 is just our other operating funds. And again, you see this monthly. This is just for the year. Revenues, expenditures, and fund balances. Page 3 is non-operating funds. Again, a summary you get each month, but just for the year. Page 4 would like to talk a little bit about. This represents our unencumbered fund balances from a cash basis or budgetary basis. It's not from a financial statement standpoint. We adjust some of these numbers for GAAP, for receivables and payables. But from an unencumbered cash basis, you can see we have some substantial fund balances, and I'm reflecting 5 years of activity. So you can kind of see the changes from one year to the next. At the end of 2018, we had a little over $70 million in unencumbered funds, which isn't an insignificant amount, but breaking it down into the various funds here gives you a little bit of an idea of where that's at, and matching it up with our capital improvement plan, you'll see where a number of these amounts are committed to certain projects.
That street maintenance looks really good.
I was going to mention that there were a couple of typos that I had. Jim caught one on page 8. It says fund instead of fund, but this one under street maintenance, that number should actually be $387,047, not 3.887. Put an extra 8 in there. Let's see if Bill would catch it, but apparently not. Yeah. And I thought he was going to say we did. We submitted the purchase orders today. Page 5 is kind of a general budget versus actual analysis, kind of giving you an idea where we ended the year. There's several columns here, but typically with our budget, we'll have an original. The first column is the original 2008 adopted budget. There are carryover purchase orders, which get added to our spending authorization for 2008. And then the combined budget, actual 2018 expenditures, and then our year-end purchase orders that we have to show as an obligation. And then the variance, positive or negative. And some of the ones that are in red were pretty much known, or basically all of them were. And then the larger one was tax refunds, which again, somewhat was higher. We had a lot more in tax collections. And then general admin, which dealt with additional transfers to the SMR fund and to the CIP. But that last column there, indicates the supplemental appropriations, and that offset those variances. Page 5, won't talk a whole lot about. It's just a 5-year history of some of our general fund revenue sources and where they've changed over those years. Just a graph comparing 2018 revenues to 2008. Just of note, in 2008, local government fund collections were 7.8% of our general fund revenue, and property tax collections were 11.6%. Combined in 2008, that represented almost 20% of our total revenue. 2018, it's about 10%. So we're all aware that revenue stream has pretty much been cut in half. Page 8 is just a summary of income tax collections. And yes, it should say general fund in the middle, not general fund. The bottom's just a graph of the breakdown where it comes from. Page 9 is something I've kind of included in the report each year. It gives a little bit of a comparison of our expenditures historically the last 3 years, and then going back 2010, 2005, 2000. And it's not so much the dollar amount, because inflation tends to change that, but the percentage of total expenditures can kind of give you a little bit of an idea if priorities have shifted in a given direction or not. And then towards the middle or the bottom half of the page, that cost of what we pay for wages and benefits as a total amount is something that, again, can be somewhat of a barometer of becoming more labor intensive or having more employees or not. And that amount for 2018 was about 54% of our general fund revenues, and it's fairly close to where it's been for quite some time. 2010 just graphs the same information from an expenditure standpoint. The next several pages are some of our more business-like operational results. Page 11 being the airport fund, and again, did fairly well, at least covering our primary cost. Page 12 is the cemetery fund. Did have quite a dip in pre-need space sale and at-need space sales, primarily driven by there's just not a lot of inventory out there to sell. And we're pretty close to, I think, adopting or at least presenting the draft final version of the cemetery master plan, and we'll have some discussion with City Council about plans into the future to provide some various other options out there and improve upon our ability to sell the spaces out there.
How many people do you think you turned or didn't do it because of the plots weren't there ones they wanted?
Well, I think from direct calls, generally we have some infill spaces, and we've had a buyback program where we can usually find some people. I think where we really see, well, we don't see it, but I think the real impact is just people that may be out there looking and driving around. There's just not a lot of, the spaces where the new space, not new, but the spaces towards the back end there. It's just, it needs to be improved. I just don't think there's a whole lot of people that are interested to a certain extent. Some people maybe lived here all their life and already have their space. I think we'll see those. We've got those burials, but I could check with Carolyn, but I don't know if I could, quantify it to a certain extent. One of the things too is we just don't have a lot of options. A lot of cemeteries have just many other than just a traditional burial in a cemetery space, whether it be cremated remains or garden type of things that people utilize that are a lot more popular today than what they've ever been. And so I think one of the recommendations as we move forward will be having multiple options for people to be interred, not just a typical burial space. I think that'll have a big impact because a lot of those things there might be a little bit of an investment up front, whether it be some aesthetic improvements to make it look nice or purchasing some of these columbariums or whatever else, but the cash flow on them is quite a bit different in the cost we have, and I think it'll help quite a bit with the operations out there. Plus, it provides people, and I think it gets us to a point where our community cemetery is a place where hopefully people look at it as a positive place that they would like to be interred. So, golf course, generally touch on this quite a bit at budget time. And if you recall, we did make a note, or we did make a change in how we staff that facility. And I have seen that in place because I've seen Chris, our park, who was the golf course manager's been out with snow plowing, doing a lot more just regular park stuff. But generally, we're going to do most of the staffing with seasonal employees. And, this is one of those things where you kind of can see that. If you look at 2018, we had total income of $161,000 and wages and benefits of almost $139,000. It just doesn't work for this type of facility. It's like if you had a Dairy Queen or something like that, and your revenue was $150,000, but you had $130,000 in wages. Doesn't include any of your building costs or buying your materials or whatever else. But again, that's just a function of kind of how we've allocated those costs. So moving forward, I think it'll be a truer representation of the economic impact of that golf course.
And I understand we still don't have a liquor license for the golf course that's getting ready to open in 2 months.
We have just checked with the state again, and we just sent some.
Yeah, just a follow-up since Ted's on the microphone. They've been asking us for our status as a nonprofit, but we're government, so we don't necessarily have a nonprofit piece of paperwork, so we're trying to give them something that will answer the same question, but it's been difficult. So we've tried a few things. Well, I don't know what we tried last, Jackie, but we gave them something, didn't we?
Last thing was Tom had to swear and promise his first grandchild to him if we weren't a nonprofit. So.
Oh, well, all right.
So I guess the operative question, are we going to have one before the season opens?
We should. I mean, we're a city.
We'll find, we can get an answer on that, right?
We'll do it.
In terms of Adora. Include this.
Just kidding. All right, sorry.
Page 14 is our water fund operation. Again, 5-year historical information. A couple of the important items to note is if you go into the last column there, 2018, we have various revenues, and operating expenses is our water treatment, water distribution crews. The difference between those generates revenues less expenses about 1.85 million. 1.285 is tied up in debt service. Leaves about $563,000 to do just maintenance items, which again, that's that level of service where we spread certain things out over a period of time, but we seem to be somewhat in a good place with that. Towards the bottom, rate increases. There was a slight increase in 2017, but all the other year, we really hadn't increased our water rates any other year, probably going back prior to 2014 a ways too. The other thing of note with our water fund is we do have a fairly large reserve balance. I think it jumped up in 2018. Our capacity fee revenues were about a little over $3 million. I think we had anticipated about 1.2, 1.3. So it was a pretty big surge. Likewise with our sewer capacity fees. In fact, I saw that kind of across the board. It's the one positive side to all the development that we had, mostly residential. Our impact fees and any of the development related fees were all up substantially in 2018. That obviously that fund balance, I'd have to match it up with our 5-year capital plan, kind of see how those funds may be utilized down the road. But we're in pretty solid position as far as from a resource standpoint, reserve balances, and pretty good shape. Same way with the sewer fund. We'll note though the sewer rates haven't changed in at least 5 years. Page 16 is the refuse fund. Again, some of those key things to kind of track, at least what I track over time, is that difference between revenue and expenditures and what it generates from a cash flow standpoint. Sewer, or the refuse fund's a little bit more predictive with our capital program. It's basically buying vehicles and occasionally making, like we did in 2018, some major building improvements. So that's why there's a big red number there from a cash flow standpoint. But we had a balance built up to cover that, so we didn't even have to finance that at all. And we're still, I think, in pretty decent shape with our refuse fund. I will note, if you look just at the operating expenses for both water, sewer, refuse, and to a certain extent even storm sewer, I think we've done a pretty good job of being cost effective. There's not large bump ups in operating costs. It's enabled us to keep our utility rates relatively low. Page 17 is the storm sewer fund. Talk a little bit about page 18, I think the last page. That's our current outstanding debt. It should say 2018 at the top, not 2017. And currently we have over $101 million in outstanding debt. Not a lot of it's tied directly to what would be considered our general fund operations. Most of it's either water, sewer, impact fees, community authority, the park levy. So those are pretty big ticket items. But that's where we're at. The total amount did go down. I don't think we issued any new long-term debt in 2018. So entertain any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Very informative, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, city manager's report?
Just real quickly, the State of the County is tomorrow. I'll be attending that. I don't know if anybody else will, but I'll be there. The Second Ward Community Initiative has an executive director. There's an open house, I think this Friday. If you're able to get over and say hello, that'd be great. We're launching our Passport app for parking. That's going to be in April. So look for some signs and decals that will be put up in the downtown, letting our residents know about that program. We sent out the pre-retreat survey last week. It's due, if you can get those back to Jane Dockery, who's the facilitator, a week from this Friday. That would be appreciated. That will help us with the agenda for the retreat on the 16th. We will be sending out tomorrow the work session agenda for a week from tonight, which will focus on housing assessment, our needs as a community with respect to housing. And Representative Brenner, or Senator Brenner, is going to be at an upcoming meeting. We're waiting to hear back.
I did speak with your office, and he will be at our next meeting.
At our next council meeting. So he'll have hopefully some good information he can provide about some of the governor's initiatives, as well as some of the things he's working on. So that is it. That's what I have.
Okay. Council comments. Ms. Skillet?
I just had some, I was puzzled to see the smoking ordinance removed from the agenda. Just some comments moving forward about the, I asked a question at the last meeting about the enforceability of it, and I didn't see anything in that ordinance that talked about how it would be enforced. I don't know if we're going to be adding that before it's brought back.
That's one of the things I had noticed. There was also some discrepancies between what we originally had, what was originally recommended from the Parks Board and what you ultimately wanted to see before you. And so the ordinance didn't read correctly, in my opinion. So I made a decision to pull it from the agenda because I didn't feel comfortable putting it before you. So hopefully we can get that addressed. Darren, that would be one of the questions I know. Should there be something in the ordinance that actually speaks to the enforceability of it and what happens if one is not? We talked about that at the meeting.
Yeah, we did have an earlier draft that we wrote had an enforceability clause that if you do this, it's its own separate offense. Okay. We kind of decided, well, the feedback we were given was that wasn't what people wanted. So it purposely does not have enforcement in it. With that said, the way enforcement would work is if you're told to stop smoking and you don't, or you keep persisting, then you could be trespassed out. So it would link up to another existing process. And that's when you trespass someone,
you would have to invite someone to then leave the park. And then if they refuse to leave the park, then you could write them for trespassing. But it would probably be a lot cleaner if there was enforceability attached to it.
And an early draft did have it in there. I know Ted and I had that in there, but I think either the council or the Parks Board didn't necessarily want to have it be a criminal offense to be smoking in the park. But we can go back to the earlier draft and easily put that back in there if that's what people want.
The problem is, even if you make it a minor misdemeanor, you give them a citation for the minor misdemeanor. If they don't leave, you're still right back to doing the trespass thing. So I don't know that it really helps us.
I don't think it adds too much. And we don't want to be in the business of writing tickets, but you're right. But we could do it.
Could we accomplish the same thing by putting up a sign that says, please don't smoke here?
You could, except you could not have the trespass element to it. So if someone was smoking and a sign says, please don't smoke, and then a police officer got complaints and said, hey, could you leave or stop smoking? And they said, no, free country, USA, then there's no hook to it. So we could not make them stop. So that's what you could not get if you didn't do that.
Okay, and then the last piece of feedback about that. I'm curious why we have smokeless tobacco included in that. If it's
Just vapors?
just not vaping, but just chewing tobacco, or why that would be offensive to anyone.
I'm going to guess, and I'll ask for assist from Ted, but the genesis of this was from the health district aspect of it. So they were going after less the smoke and more the healthy part.
The health district basically includes all tobacco forms in there, including smokeless. So,
But you don't have to. I mean, that's
I
that's your
disagree with that.
decision.
yeah, I mean, that could change,
It's
but
not offensive to anybody else if you want to chew
Right.
tobacco or if you want to chew gum.
It depends on where you're spitting.
Well, the spitting is different.
That would be littering, right? I mean, if you're, it just seems like it's unnecessarily,
okay.
right, okay.
That could easily be taken out. I think the question, and I'm not a scientist in this field, but we had a discussion internally about the vaping. So it's a little bit different, but it's similar at the e-cigarettes. So we included that right now, but if you want to not include that because it doesn't have the secondhand of, I don't think it has the secondhand effects that cigarettes do.
No, some vaping doesn't have any smoke at all.
So that's another
But some
option.
do.
Some
I've gone
do,
through vapes before and it's like.
and they have a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
So it's a tough issue, but we can.
Smokeless tobacco.
What is it?
Smokeless
It's
is
not
not.
smoke, it's water.
It
Well, it
depends
depends on
what
what's in
brand you
there.
get.
The smokeless tobacco traditionally was the snuff or the dip, but technically now the other stuff is, I guess, smokeless as well, maybe, but it's a different category. I think.
There's the vape, there's different types. So like the rage right now is the Juul, which is even vaporless. So you don't know it's.
Okay, I guess we can talk about it more when it
Yeah.
comes back.
Thanks, Ted. Anything else?
That's it.
Mr. Browning?
I've nothing.
Mr. Rohr?
Nothing.
Mr. Hellingham?
Couple things.
Okay.
One is, and I know I talked to Tom and I think I talked to the chief. The chief followed up on it. I know there's really nothing we could really do about it, but the semi parking out of Walmart, again. So the other day, a week and a half ago, 8 semis parked at Walmart. And it's becoming just, I understand we probably can't do anything about it, but it would be nice if we could at least encourage Walmart, if they now have their general manager or store manager in place. I mean, they have their signs up, semi park on both sides of the sign that says no semi parking. And like I said, there's like 8 of them. It just looks, you know, the people at Speedway were talking about prostitution and what have you in the truck stop. Well, you only have to go to Walmart to find the truck stop. I don't know about the prostitution, but it's all there. So anyways, it'd be nice to have.
I think that's real similar to the tobacco conversation, is they have to request us to move them along per their signage. And if they're not doing that and they don't want to do that, there really isn't a lot we could do.
Yeah, it's just a visual eyesore. So, yeah, for what it's worth. The second thing I have here, and I'm going to hand a copy out to everyone, is something I've been working on over a period of time. I'm calling it my transparency initiative. And the genesis of this is largely from social media. And as you guys know, I pretty much go head to head with anybody on Facebook or other social media to try and clear up misconceptions and eliminate some bad information. But a lot of what we have, take one, pass those down there, take one, pass it down. So this is not saying that we're doing anything good, bad, or different, but these are my thoughts on how we can make ourselves more transparent. We always say that transparency is important to us on council, and but when you look at people's comments on social media, it's all the old guys network. They're not telling you the whole truth, where they, doing all this stuff behind closed doors, this, that, and the next thing. So these are just my thoughts on what we could potentially do if we are serious about being transparent. And I would like to have a discussion about this at an upcoming council meeting. I'd like to see this on the agenda and have some open discussion with regards to this. So that's all I have.
Okay.
I have nothing, thank you.
The only thing I do want to do is tell Bill the guys did a fabulous job Wednesday. So thank you very much. And
Yeah,
please
good job.
pass it on. This was the heaviest snow anybody's ever seen. And all I heard was comments about once they got to the city, the county, yes, but even when they got to the city, how great our roads were. So kudos to the guys. Thank you. And I'll look for a motion to go back into executive session. We can take a short break if we need to. So it's 9:13. Want to go back in at 9:25, like 10 minutes? Is that good for everybody? You want 5 minutes?
I don't need 10 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes.
I don't even need a minute. I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nobody else go to the restroom? I need a motion to go into executive session.
Move to go into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 1.2.222.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh,
First,
thanks,
second.
Can you take a roll call vote while you're here, Ellie?
I can't, I didn't hear.
At first by Ken, second by Browning. Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
You got it.
8.